entering the 18th chapter of the story. We are over halfway through this discipline that we share together. This morning, we are afforded a wonderful opportunity. This morning, we are going to hear from Randy Frazee, who is the author of the story. One of the main reasons I chose this particular study to share with the entire community of faith was because of what you're about to see, was the accompanying video. Many of you in the congregation have shared in that video either at 9:15 in the adult class or at noon in the sanctuary. But every week there's an accompanying video that goes along with the chapter that I think has been done so well, so thought out, and just presented in a way that makes it come alive. And I thought this would be a wonderful Sunday to share that with you. This morning, Randy Frazee is going to share his reflections on the 18th chapter of the story. I hope it is a blessing to you, and I hope that you will glean wonderful truths from his truth as we prepare to come to the Lord's table.
ที่มีที่นัทวนมีทุกข์สี
This is your story. This is my story. But most of all,
สี
this is the greatest story ever told. This is God's story. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israel from the royal family and nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's place. He was to teach them the language and literatures of Babylonians. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar; to Hananiah, Shadrach; to Mishael, Meshach; and to Azariah, Abednego. At the end of the time, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service in every matter of wisdom and understanding. He found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom.
We have come to chapter 18 of the story, one of my favorites. By God's sovereign choice, a young man named Daniel was forced to live in the space in between. Judah is living out a 70-year sentence of discipline for disobeying the commands of God and tainting his upper story reputation before the other nations. After the 70 years is up, God will open up the way for Judah to come back to Jerusalem and continue the plan to bring the world the Messiah. Daniel must live in this space that God has ordained for him to live with an upright heart. In the lower story, Daniel finds himself away from home. His home is Jerusalem. We learn in chapter 18 that the first group of people to be exiled are a group of young, elite men who are going to be trained as leaders in the ever-expanding pagan nation of Babylon. Here's a description of the men chosen. They are young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. Daniel and his 3 friends, renamed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are chosen. They are likely teenagers around 16 to 18 years old. It must have been super tough for them to be stripped from their homes, their parents, at an age when most of us are thinking about driver's license and prom. As Daniel enters a three-year-long officer's training program, he makes a resolve. I love the word resolve. Daniel resolved himself not to be defiled with the royal food and wine. His supervisors allowed Daniel and his 3 friends to take on an experiment for 10 days. For 10 days, they only ate vegetables and drank water. At the end of the 10 days, we are told that they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the rich royal food of the king. They ended up changing the diet of all the men to Daniel's vegetarian diet, which I'm sure made the men real happy. But it didn't stop with the diet. It bled over into other areas as well. Here's the report card we received on Daniel and his friends. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. Daniel is teaching us as we walk on foreign soil, we must be resolved not to become addicted to the diet of our culture. We often think that we can't get away with this, that this is not how it works in the real world. Daniel and his friends didn't think this way. As a matter of fact, they proved that just maybe the culture will start mimicking your lifestyle over theirs. Now fast forward. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon is arrogant, self-centered, and narcissistic. Not an uncommon thing in the secular world. Listen to this. He erects this 90-foot tall statue of none other than himself. Then he makes this decree. Anytime you hear music sounding, you are to stop in your tracks, bow down, and worship the statue. Anyone who fails to bow down will be thrown into a fiery furnace. Of course, Daniel and his friends refused to bow down to anyone but God. As office politics goes, there are some guys out to get Daniel and his friends, those goody two-shoes that cause them to eat broccoli and lettuce 3 times a day. So furious is the king that he turns up the heat on the furnace, making it 7 times hotter. Before the 3 men were thrown into the fire, they made this final declaration. If the God we serve is able to deliver us, then he will deliver us from the blazing furnace. But if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Now, where were these guys when they were looking for kings for Israel? Now listen to this. The 3 men fall into the furnace with hands bound. Nebuchadnezzar looks into the furnace, then he says, "Didn't we just throw 3 guys into the furnace?" "Yeah," replies the subordinates. "Then why do I see 4 men walking around in the fire?" Not only are these 3 guys not consumed, there's a 4th guy with them just walking around. What are they doing? I see them high-fiving each other and doing chest bumps. Many scholars believe that the 4th person is none other than the pre-incarnate Jesus himself. One more story of the adventures of Daniel. Babylon has fallen to the Persian Empire. Now the new king of Persia is a guy named Darius, who really liked Daniel and promoted him to a significant position. Word gets out that the king is thinking of putting Daniel in charge of the whole kingdom. Who said you had to do wrong to rise? But as you can imagine, there are people who didn't like Daniel, who were jealous of his success. So they tried to set him up to fail. Here's how it reads in the story. At this, the administrators tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel and his conduct of governmental affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God." Wow. How cool it would be if the only thing that people could pin on me was how deeply devoted I was to God. They go to the king and pull a fast one over on him and hit him where most leaders are weak. They stroke his ego. They have him sign a decree which couldn't be reversed that stated that anyone who prayed to any other god or man besides Darius during the next 30 days would be thrown into the lion's den. Darius agreed. Daniel got the paperwork on the deal, but it did not deter him in prayer to Yahweh 3 times a day with his windows open toward Jerusalem, his real home. Of course, Daniel is caught. The king is distraught that his little charade will cost Daniel his life, but there's nothing he could do about it. Daniel was thrown into a den of hungry lions, and a huge rock was placed over the pit. In the morning, the king rushes to the pit to see if God saved him. And he did. Not a scratch on his body. In the lower story, the king throws me into a lion's den for not bowing down to him. In the upper story, the King of Kings closes the mouth of the lions for bowing only to him. Here's the big deal. The way Daniel and his 3 friends lived their lives on foreign soil, secular territory, pointed people to God. Here is what Nebuchadnezzar said of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way. Listen to what Darius said about Daniel after they pulled him out of the den. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and revere the God of Daniel. For this is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. You know, we're really in the same position as Daniel, aren't we? In the lower story, Daniel finds himself away from home. His home is Jerusalem. In the upper story, we find ourselves away from home. Our home is the New Jerusalem. Therefore, as we walk on foreign soil, we must be resolved not to become addicted to the diet of our culture. In the lower story, the world may throw me into a den of lions or into a fiery furnace for not bowing down to them. But in the upper story, the King of Kings will stand with me and shut the mouth of the lions for only bowing to him. And if he doesn't save me, I have no regrets, following him with my whole heart. And if we are courageous enough to align our lives to the upper story of God in this way, we too will be responsible for pointing people to God. I love the way Peter puts it to us. Dear friends, I urge you, as foreigners and exiles, to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Maybe we should all grab a piece of broccoli and a glass of water and ponder this just a little more.
As exiled people, we are called to the one table this morning. Randy Frazee brings to us that in one way or another we all are exiled. It may be a spiritual exile, it may be a physical exile, it may be a relational exile, but we all are exiles coming to the table this morning to commit to do one thing. That is the body of Christ, the church, to point people toward God. As we prepare to come to the table, may all we think, say, and do point brothers and sisters to the God we worship.